I'm Maria Flynn. I'm the CEO of JFF. And there's a number that I have been reflecting on quite a bit in the past couple of weeks. And that number is 10,591. So 10,591, that's the number of days since I first walked into the US Department of Labor in early June of 1991 as an idealistic 22-year-old looking to change the world. It was 2 years after Tiananmen Square. It was 4 months before Anita Hill testified before Congress, and that was about a decade before 9/11. And in the 29 years since then, it's hard to believe it's been that long, but since then, my colleagues and I have been proud of our work and many accomplishments, but we recognize that we still have so much to do in the fields of education and workforce development. Since I've been with JFF and arguably since the organization's inception, equity has been a driving value for our work in the field. But over the past few weeks, just as Jim said just a few minutes ago, I've been finding myself asking, where could I have done more? Where could I have pushed harder for greater equity and inclusivity in our work and in our world? Where could I have taken swifter action to change policies and practices that adversely impact the people of color? How could I have used the organizations and the teams that I've led to fight more effectively for justice, for racial justice, for social justice, and economic justice? The senseless murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, just the latest in a line of such killings and violence against Black people, on top of centuries of injustice to Blacks and other people of color, has me and so many other leaders considering how we can and how we will better advocate and mobilize our work for equity and justice. Which brings us here to Horizons. I want our time together over the next 4 days to be a place where we grapple with some of these hard questions, where we can be reflective and question our own assumptions and implicit biases, where we can listen deeply and engage authentically with others, where we can learn from one another about how to dismantle systemic racism and take a stand for equity within the education and workforce systems as we recover from the devastating economic downturn that COVID-19 has caused. But perhaps more importantly, I want our time here to lead to action. We've all had our inboxes flooded with statements in the past week from CEOs, myself included, condemning racism. It was great to see, and particularly because it was really from a very broad range of organizations. But we need to be working on what's next. Acknowledging the terrible racism and oppression in our country and making a statement against it is just the first step. It's the beginning of a journey towards building a more equitable, inclusive, and just future. So what tangible actions are we going to take individually, organizationally, collectively? What solutions are we going to develop and implement? And what connections can be made that can lead to collective action? How will the world have changed? How will it have improved by this time next year when I hope we're back in New Orleans, which is where we typically hold Horizons? The question that has been driving the JFF team since COVID struck back in March is how might we design and build an equitable economic recovery? As we all know, we have gone from an unprecedented low unemployment rates to historically high numbers practically overnight. And it's the responsibility of all of us to think about where we'll be when this crisis is over and in the years and generations to follow. We don't want to simply rebuild our systems and return to where we were before the COVID-19 crisis. The old status quo was inadequate and broken, and it created and perpetuated deep inequities in education and workforce outcomes, mostly along race and class lines. We have to imagine a better future for all, especially people of color and low-income people, and use this recovery to reimagine and reinvent the systems and programs we need to build an equitable future that works. I'm speaking to you here today with a bit of my own history and story, but also as CEO of JFF. And as Richard said, this is a role I've been in for about 4 years. Some of you joining us are old friends, and it's great to be with you, but many of you, probably most of you, are actually new to JFF, which is really terrific. So I'm excited to welcome you, and we're really thrilled to have you with us. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, we are a national nonprofit organization that works at the intersection of education and workforce. And since 1983, we've been striving to build a future that works for all. And as my great colleague Lucretia said in the opening video, where all truly means all. A core part of our approach is that we aim to put people at the center of what we do. We focus on the realities and lived experiences that underlie the data. And while we as a collective field spend a lot of time working within traditional systems, especially since they allow us to impact people at scale, at JFF, we believe it's important not to be too protective of the systems when it's necessary, especially when it's those systems that are driving inequities. We shouldn't be afraid to challenge and fundamentally redesign them to better suit the needs of individuals. 2 years ago, we launched JFF Labs to help bring some new energy and technology solutions to that challenge, and we'll be talking more about that in the days ahead. But let's never forget at the end of the day that all of us here on this platform are doing this work to help individuals, real people in real communities who are struggling in today's economy. Let's not be impatient to return to an ineffective and inequitable status quo. So over the next couple of days, we'll be bringing in the perspectives of people from across our stakeholder groups, and we're going to be using the framing that we use internally to describe how JFF does its work: design, scale, influence, and invest. We like to think of ourselves as a big tent with lots of room for all voices, so it's really terrific to have you all here today. But please remember that this is a big experiment. This is obviously our first virtual horizons. We're no longer 1,000 people together in a hotel in New Orleans. We're now over 5,000 people from across the globe gathered together virtually. We're experimenting a lot with the format to really see what's possible and what's not. And we have tried to push the envelope in partnership with the team at IDEO to make this a really engaging experience. So I hope you'll give us some grace in those times when we fall short, if there are some tech glitches or if we don't get the tone quite right. We're trying our best, and please be patient with us. And we'd love to get your feedback in real time so we can adjust on the fly. I welcome you to send me tweets or DM me on Twitter. My handle is @MariaK.Flynn. It's a great way to get in touch with me directly. And I also want to thank our sponsors. It's because of them and their support and them sticking with us when we switched from a in-person event to a virtual event that's enabling us to provide this to you free of charge. Being able to do this for free and to make it widely accessible was really important to the team and I. So let's do this. I want us to really push ourselves and challenge each other to truly design an equitable economic and social recovery. So let's think together about what actions we're going to take as individuals, as organizations, collectively across this group, and how will we make tomorrow better than yesterday? Each and every one of us are leaders, regardless of from what vantage point we're entering this conversation. And it's so important that we lead together. I'll be throwing the weight of my position, my privilege, and my power behind action and real change. I have 10,591 days of work behind me, but I am pledging this to make this a new day one. And I hope that you'll do the same.